Hello everyone, in this video we will be installing PeerTube on a Raspberry Pi. PeerTube is a decentralized video hosting platform and is an alternative to other video hosting platforms such as YouTube, Vimeo, Dailymotion, and many others. The decentralized part of PeerTube means that when you have videos uploaded to your site and other PeerTube sites follow your site, the videos will show up on their site as if they're hosted on their site and people can see them, watch them from their site. Also, when you log in as an administrator and you follow other sites, other PeerTube sites, the videos uploaded to those other sites will show up on your site as if they're uploaded to your site. So I have a Raspberry Pi Model 3 here, which I purchased roughly 2 years ago from Amazon, and it has 4 USB ports, it has a Wi-Fi adapter, it has a Cat5 Ethernet, it has a HDMI, it has a power adapter, and a mini SD card adapter, and other cool stuff. But we'll just be using the very basics in this tutorial in order just to get a server up and running hosting videos. And so we will be using Raspberry Pi Imager software in order to flash the mini SD card with the operating system. I have a mini SD card here, 128 gigabit, which I'll be using with this configuration. And then after we flash the mini SD card with the operating system called Raspbian Lite, we will be logging into it and then installing all the dependencies such as the database server, the web server, and other dependencies along with PeerTube so that we can serve this video hosting platform. And okay, so in order for us to store a lot of data, we're not going to be able to shove it all into this mini SD card. So what we're going to do is we're going to use an external hard drive bay. I have a 4 bay external hard drive thing here, and I'm going to be using a 4 terabyte hard drive. Of course, what we could do later on is use bigger hard drives, 12 terabyte hard drives. And since there's 4 ports here, what we can do is fill it up, all 4 of them, to be 12 terabyte hard drives and combine them into a single hard drive so that we have more space. But I think for this project, 4 terabytes is enough. And so I'll leave that for now. Then if anything, if I start running out of space, I can rearrange things and copy all the data over. Just for now, this will work. And so we're not going to get into all of those advanced things. We're just doing a very basic configuration in this video to get things up and running. And then it will be up to you to do other advanced configurations and performance optimizations as you see fit, and changing the theme, the look of the site, and all of that good stuff. Alright guys, so let's start by going to the project website on GitHub and reading through the README section here. I'll just read the introduction and the features so we have a better understanding what PeerTube is about. PeerTube is a free, decentralized, and federated video platform developed as an alternative to other platforms that centralize our data and attention, such as YouTube, Dailymotion, or Vimeo. But one organization hosting PeerTube alone may not have enough money to pay for bandwidth and video storage of its servers. All servers of PeerTube are interoperable as a federated network, and non-PeerTube servers can be part of the larger Videoverse federated video network by talking our implementation of ActivityPub Video load is reduced thanks to P2P, BitTorrent, in the web browser via WebTorrent. Learn more. To learn more, see this 2-minute video posted on PeerTube explaining what PeerTube is and how it works. PeerTube's project homepage, joinpeertube.org. And then there's some demonstration instances, peertube.cpy.re, peertube2.cpy.re, peertube3.cpy.re. This video demonstrating the communication between PeerTube and Mastodon, a decentralized Twitter alternative. Features. Video streaming. Just upload your videos and be sure they will stream anywhere. Add a description, some tags, and your video will be discoverable by entire video Fediverse, not just your instance. You can even embed a player on your favorite website. Keep in touch with video creators. Follow your favorite channels from PeerTube or really any other place. No need to have an account on the instance you watched a video to follow its author. You can do all of that from the Fediverse, Mastodon, Pleroma, and plenty others, or just with good old RSS. An interface to call home. Be it a user or an instance administrator, you can decide what your experience will be like. Don't like the colors? They are easy to change. Don't want to list videos of an instance but let your users subscribe to them? Don't like the regular web client? All of that can be changed, and much more. No UX dark pattern, no mining your data, no video recommendation bullshit, TM. Communities that help each other. In addition to visitors using WebTorrent to share the load among them, instances can help each other by caching one another's videos. This way, even small instances have a way to show content to a wider audience, as they will be shouldered by friend instances. More about that in our redundancy guide. Content creators can get help from their viewers in the simplest way possible. A support button showing a message linking to their donation accounts, or really anything. No more pay-per-view and advertisements that hurt visitors and alter creativity. More about that in our FAQ. Alright guys, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to the production guide and install this. If we scroll down a little bit, we can open the production guide. I already have it open here in this tab. Alright, so when we go to the production guide, it says, please don't install PeerTube for production on a device behind a low bandwidth connection. Example, your ADSL link. If you want information about the appropriate hardware to run PeerTube, please see the FAQ. Alright, so when I first installed my site, I was behind a 10 megabit download and 1 megabit, I think it was 1.5 or something, megabit upload, and users would go to the site and always complain about the lag. And so now I have a fiber connection with 500 megabit up and down, and so now I don't have a problem with connections. But if you have a slow connection, I think maybe if you have like a 20 megabit, you know, or like if you have like 5 megabit up, I think that should be pretty good. But the more the better, you know. If you can get a gigabit, you know, connection for your instance, that would be awesome. But if you're just trying to run it on a home internet connection, that's also fine. You know, it's just gonna be a small instance where, you know, you can have maybe 1-2 people watching videos at the same time. You know, it'll still slow down, you know, but they can still watch it, you know. but with a faster connection. Say that's if you have like the slowest connection, if you have the budget connection. But if you have the like advanced package or something, I think it's gonna be not much buffering when people come watch videos on your site. So that's my little bit of input about that. And so what I've done is I've gone through all of these and set up instructions, all of these commands, and I've compiled my own document here in the notes. And so we're going to follow along. Also, before we start following this document, we need to go and follow the steps on the dependencies guide. So I have that tab open as well. And as you can see, it shows you how to install it on all these types of different Linux and Unix even, and on Mac and other distributions. But it's much easier to install it on Debian or Ubuntu or CentOS or something like that. I mean, for the most part, all of these are pretty simple, you know, to install things on. I personally just like Debian flavor, and luckily this Raspberry Pi has a Debian flavor of a operating system that it's running called Raspbian Lite, which we'll be installing on this, or which we already have installed, depending where I put this in the video. Okay, so what I've done is compiled these instructions here in this notepad that we will follow along to install this video hosting platform on our Raspberry Pi. Really, we're installing it on a mini SD card, so you know, even if the Raspberry Pi gets broken, we just pull out the mini SD card and just put it in another Raspberry Pi and we're good to go, you know. So, and I think these Raspberry Pis, I haven't tested this, but it's just a theory that you can have 10 users simultaneously on your Raspberry Pi server with this video hosting platform. It should support, let's say, 5 or 10 users using your site at the same time. So that's something I want to test. I can't wait to test that. Just wanted to bring that up to you guys. So now that we have the instructions pulled up, we're just going to basically copy and paste this stuff into the terminal after we image the mini SD card, right? And so let me turn off my Raspberry Pi here and unhook this stuff. Let me actually pull out this SD card because we're going to flash it right now. See, I have a 128 megabit, 128 gigabyte SD card, and I'm gonna put it inside of this SD adapter. I guess it's a micro SD, or no, it's 4 micro SD. There's so many of these names, it confuses me, you guys. So yeah, I guess it just means I'm not that smart, huh? And that's okay. But yeah, so let's go ahead and pop that in there. And what we'll be using is this Raspberry Pi imager to flash the operating system onto this mini SD card. So let's go ahead and download this imager. I tried to do this from a Mac, but it failed, and I think that's because I have an older version of Mac OS, and so it's possibly because of that. Your mileage may vary, so I had to do this from a Windows, and it's working fine from Windows for me. So let's go ahead and open that up because I've already have it downloaded. So if we just pop that open, alrighty, and then make sure we put that mini SD card in there. Let's go ahead and choose the operating system, and that's gonna be okay. Alright, so one thing to remember, you do not want to ever install a desktop version of an operating system with all of these desktop libraries and stuff on a server. it will make your server easier to hack, and it just all adds all this bulk on there that is not needed. So don't ever install desktop libraries and all this stuff like a GUI and X11. If you can avoid it, then do at all cost. So we're going to go to Raspbian Other, and then we're going to select Raspbian Lite. It's a port of Debian with no desktop environment. That's what we want. And then we're going to select the SD card. I inserted 128 gigabyte card in there. And let's click right, and then it's going to take a good amount. So go get yourself some coffee, some tea, go for a walk, get some fresh air, walk your dog if you have a dog, walk your cat if you have a cat. Yeah, just relax for a little bit, and then it's going to write this to the mini SD card and then verify it. And so we'll just come back to this once that finishes. Okay, so now that the imaging of the operating system has completed, we'll go ahead and click continue, and we'll pull out the SD card and we'll put it back in, because we need to do a final step. We need to create a file called SSH so that we can remotely log in to the Raspberry Pi. So let's go ahead and open up the boot and create a new file, new text document, call it SSH, all lowercase. Alright, now we can eject this drive, unplug the card, and let's go ahead and put it into our Raspberry Pi. Now make sure your power is plugged in, your network cable, and your external hard drive bay with your hard drive. Make sure everything's hooked up and ready to go, and then press the power button. Alright, so now what we will need to do is we need to go to our router, which, you know, my current setup is kind of complex over here, but most people, they usually have just the internet router. You just log into it with the address of something like 192.168.0.1 or 192.168.1.1 or 192.168.254.254, and then in there you go to the DHCP client list, because this Raspberry Pi has now been issued a IP address, and so we need to find out what the IP address is so that we can hook it up to a domain name, which is the domain name that we'll be using for our website. And we'll just add the entry into our Etsy hosts file, so that we can locally set everything up and make everything work. And then once everything is ready to go, we can add port forwarding rules to our router to open up port 80 and open up port 443, and then point the IP address in our domain in the DNS settings to create an A record or even a CNAME record that will point to the IP address of your internet connection, so that people can connect to the port 80 and port 443, which are HTTP and HTTPS. for the secure connection. And for the most part, the website, it's configured to redirect non-secure to secure. But you want to basically open both up. Right, so I already know what the IP address is. And so what we'll need to do is open up Notepad and then go to our hosts file. Oops, actually I needed to open this as an administrator. So let's go there, Notepad, right click, run as administrator. Then go ahead and click File, Open, and go to the C drive, Windows. Oh, come on, scroll. My mouse doesn't want to scroll sometimes. And sometimes it goes crazy when it scrolls. Alright, so Windows, System 32, and then drivers, etc. And then you want to make sure that you're showing all files. And then double click on hosts to open that file. As you can see, I've already added the IP address for the domain name that I'll be using for the website in here. And once you configure a domain name with PeerTube, you cannot change it anymore. There's no way to change it. So make sure that you pick a domain name that you're not going to want to change. Otherwise, you'll just have to, create another instance. Most likely. There's no functionality to change the domain name right now. Okay, so now that we have that in place and the Raspberry Pi is up and running, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and open up the terminal. And I have some notes over here ready for us that I've compiled. The way that I've put together these notes is by going to the production guide on the PeerTube project website and just putting together a list of all of these commands that are required to install this software. And we want to also make sure to get all the steps from the dependency guide, which also I've included within my notes. And I'm working on a script to automate this whole process, so we're not going to have to do this manually so much. But for now, this is what we have. Sometimes doing it manually, it's not such a bad thing, because then you know for sure you got it how you want it, because sometimes automating things, it doesn't always work out as expected. Alright, so let's remote into our Raspberry Pi, type SSH space pi at the domain name that you're using for your website, and you're going to want to accept the host authenticity, type yes, and then the default password is going to be Raspberry. Alrighty. And so the first thing that we need to do is we need to change the password and make some other configurations with the raspi config tool. So let's type sudo raspi config. Alright, so let's press enter and let's change the password now. Alrighty, And so it's been changed successfully. Now let's go down to the network options and change the host name. Alright, so please note, RFCs mandate that a hostname's labels may contain only the ASCII characters A through Z, case insensitive, the digits 0 through 9, and the hyphen. Hostname labels cannot begin or end with a hyphen. No other symbols, punctuation characters, or blank spaces are permitted. Okay, so let's go ahead and name this DeadTube 1. Alrighty. I like to add a number at the end, just in case if I have multiple, and then I can like cluster them together or something, or set it up where it's like a central database, separate out the database, and make them like just web server nodes that connect to a central storage and all that stuff. So I have this. I always do that. Is add a number. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually, before we change the locale, let's go to, I think it's advanced options. No, it's update right here. Let's go to update and update the Raspi config tool first. Right, we better update it before doing any other configuration options, just in case. So first thing, change password, just to make sure you get that situated, in case so somebody else doesn't log in and mess with your thing while you're getting things set up. Not that that could happen, but it depends. So yeah, it's best to not let defaults stick around for too long. Alright, great, so that updated pretty quick. Let's go ahead and set the locales now. So go to localization options, change locale, and let's go ahead and make sure to select NUS UTF-8. There's already NGB UTF-8 selected. Let's just leave that in place so it doesn't cause any problems. And also add NUS UTF-8. Where is it? NUS UTF-8 right there. Okay. And so now tab over to the OK, enter, and let's make NUS UTF-8 to be our default locale for the system environment. Alright, so let's give it a moment to generate these locales. And then next we'll set the time zone. I'm in the US in Central Time, so I'll be setting that time zone. You'll want to set your time zone to wherever you are so it doesn't confuse you later when you're looking at logs, and when people upload, it'll just throw things off, I think. So yeah, you want to make sure you have the correct time zone. Okay, so next we go to localization options again, and we go to change time zone. And I am in the US Central Time. Okay, so next we go to expand file system, so that would be in advanced options. And just let that run. Root partition has been resized. The file system will be enlarged upon the next reboot. Okay, so let's go ahead and tab over and go to finish. Would you like to reboot now? Yes. Let's give it a minute. And when you look at the lights flashing on your Raspberry Pi, you'll be able to kind of tell like what state it's in, you know, if it's ready to be logged into or not. So yeah, I think it should be ready by now. Alrighty, now that we're logged back into our Raspberry Pi, we're ready to start running some updates on the operating system and upgrading any kind of libraries that have been updated since the time of its release. So let's go ahead and issue this command. I'm basically going to be copying and pasting most of these, except for when it comes to possibly the configuration. I'll manually get in there. Okay, I gotta right click in the terminal here to paste. Alrighty, let's click yes on that. We could actually add a -y so it would automatically press yes for us. Alright, and so the next command for us to run will be this one. And you'll notice that some of these commands I've shifted around packages, like in the production guide they put like GCC, G++ make to be installed along with Node.js, but I just kind of moved it up here and stuff to install it earlier. So those are some of my modifications, but it's fine, everything is gonna work just great. So let's go ahead and paste this command, and this should install byobo git curl unzip exfat utils, so that we can format the 4 terabyte hard drive, which we'll be doing next actually as an exfat. And we're using exfat because it allows for a larger storage and then the previous ones like FAT32 or FAT16. And another reason why we're using exfat is because, say like we need to access this hard drive from another computer for whatever reason, from a Mac or Windows or from a Linux PC or a server or whatever it may be, it'll make it more versatile for us to be able to access the data and write and all that stuff onto it. Yeah, but if we were using larger storage, if we were in need of a larger storage, something that we would use is ZFS file system for that. I would highly suggest using ZFS actually, but things get really complicated, so for this setup we'll just be using exfat, simply because it's with the Raspberry Pi and we want to be able to attach the hard drive to other computers just in case. So yeah, now that the install of that command finished, let's go ahead and run byobo. Byobo is a window manager, so we'll get some tabs here, because otherwise with the terminal we can't open tabs and all that stuff. Yeah, so that's the main reason why I installed byobo. It's a really great tool. Alright, so next we'll go ahead and run, we'll need to do this as root, so let's just type sudo su hyphen. Alright, and so now let's just type parted, or actually wait, before we type parted we need to find out what is the hard drive. We want to make sure that we have that right, it's not some other letter. So let's type fdisk -L. Alright, and so we see dev SDA is our 4 terabyte hard drive here. And it's already been formatted, partitioned from previous times when I tried. So I'm not going to, well, let me go ahead and just run these commands to show you guys. So yeah, you want to run parted, and you can pass the device SDA to make sure that it'll be using that device, because sometimes if you don't pass it, you just run parted, it'll use the first one, and if you might have multiple, then it could cause issues. Alright, so now let's make label GPT, and the existing disk label on dev SDA will be destroyed and all data on this disk will be lost. Do you want to continue? Yes. Alrighty, and so now just type unit and space %. Now type make part primary, make part primary 0 100% up percent. Alrighty, and now let's print that configuration to the hard drive. Alright, now we can quit out of that. So now that is done, we can format the file system. So let's type mkfs dot exfat space /dev /sda1. Alright, we're formatting the first partition, the primary partition on the hard drive with the exfat file system type. Sweet. So now that we have that completed, let's go ahead and install Node.js version 10. Sweet. Okay, so that added the repositories for us, right? But now we need to actually install the Node.js package. And so next we need to install Yarn, which is a package manager, which allows us to install other packages. It's basically an updated version of npm. npm just wasn't cutting it. It's not cutting it anymore. Some stuff is the way that it handles dependencies and stuff like this. Alright, so let's go ahead and add Yarn there. And we need to add the repository now to the package, to the source list. Alright, and so now now we are ready to actually update, because once we add some sources, we have to run apt update or apt-get update, and then we can actually install. Let's add a Y there, so it automatically just confirms that. Sweet, now Yarn is installing, and then we'll just check the version of Yarn that is installed. Alright, Alright, so it actually already says it there. 1224. Great. And so now let's install the goods, which is FFmpeg, Nginx, our web server, certbot, which generates SSL certificates, PostgreSQL, which is the database, and Redis server, which we're using as the queue for processing all the background jobs. Actually, PeerTube uses that internally for processing all the things that are happening, you know, when they happen. And so once this is complete, what we'll do is we'll start the database server and the Redis server and enable those services so that they will automatically start up every time this Raspberry Pi is turned on or rebooted. Awesome. So now that PostgreSQL database is installed, it's telling us to run this pg cuddle cluster 11 main start command to start the database server. So that's the next command that we'll be running. Sweet. So now the database server should be running. Let's go ahead and start the Redis server with this command. And I like to just run this command just in case, because there's multiple services running this database server thing. Alright, and so let's enable Redis server and PostgreSQL to start up once the device is booted. Once it boots up. Alright, so that created a systemd file for the Redis server. And let's go ahead and do the same thing for the PostgreSQL server here. And it will also create a systemd file which will start the service when the Raspberry Pi boots up. So now let's check FFmpeg version, and we need to make sure that it is at least version 3 or greater. Alright, so we have version 4.1.4, and how I know this is from the production guide here. Okay, so here's the production guide. They list it here somewhere. Oh, that's upgrade already, right? Oh, I'm sorry, it's the dependencies section still. And we need the Debian one. And yeah, right here it says should be greater than or equal to 3, and G++ should be greater than or equal to 5. Alright, so now that we know what that is all about, let's just make sure G++. I know it is, but I just want to know 100%. 8.3.0. Okay, we're good. And so let's go ahead and create a PeerTube user with the directory, home directory, located at var www PeerTube. Alright. Now let's go ahead and set a password for this PeerTube user. For this user named PeerTube. Awesome. So now that our password for the user has been updated successfully, we can go ahead and create the PostgreSQL database user named PeerTube. And when you get this warning, could not change directory to root, permission denied, is because the sudo u postgres is trying to run this command, but at the same time it wants access, or tries to access, doesn't try to access, but as that user it can't have access to this directory when it's trying to set the current directory, so it complains. But that's no biggie. Alright, so for the Postgres user, we'll just leave the default password, which is PeerTube, all lowercase. Alrighty. And then later we can always change it. It's no biggie. Okay, let's go ahead and create the database and make it accessible by this user that we just created. Alright. Now let's go ahead and add some extensions to this database we just created. It'll allow the application to do more cool stuff with database queries. Oh, let me make sure I select all that. Okay. Alright, so now we're at the part where we're gonna start installing the PeerTube software, and we need to get the version number of PeerTube first, right? So we're looking at installing PeerTube version 2.1.1. Alrighty, and so now let's go ahead and create some directories in the home directory for this PeerTube user. Alright, and so now we need to edit the FS tab to make it so that when this Raspberry Pi boots up and the USB hard drive is hooked up to it, like this whole configuration the way it is, if it reboots, whatever, it'll come back up ready with the storage. And so we need to just add this to that file, /dev sda. Oh wait, hold on, sorry, /dev /sda1, some spacing, /var /www /peertube /storage. That's where we will be storing, that's where we're mounting the hard drive, the 4 terabyte hard drive, as an exFAT. And we're leaving the defaults and no A time, that's no access time. I think it should be fine not to store access time, and it speeds up a little bit if we don't store the access time. So alright, so that's good to go, right? Let's add an extra line here at the end. Oops, what am I doing? What am I doing here? Sorry guys. I wanted to, okay, there's a extra line, so let's go ahead and press Control X, Y, and press enter. So that was the etc fs tab file, and so now we need to download PeerTube actually. Did that add a new line over there? Hold on just a second. Alright, there we go. You just gotta make sure it didn't mess up that command when I was adding a typo in there. Alright, so let's go ahead and download the zip file of PeerTube. That's what this command will do. And so next we'll be unzipping that. Yeah, I gotta find my other mouse because using this touchpad is so difficult. Alright, so now the zip file is downloaded. Let's inflate it, unzip it, in other words, and Once that finishes, we'll be creating a static link to the project. Because it saves it, it extracts it into PeerTube with a version number. And so we're gonna statically link it to PeerTube latest, right? And so next we're going to install the dependencies for the PeerTube project. And this command is going to take a while. As you can see, the Byobu output here is showing that I have 4 1.2 gigahertz processors in there. Right? It's a 4-core, it's a quad core. And there's a gig of memory in there, and 22% of it is being used up right now. Or is that 22% free? And there is 115 gigabytes free of storage, and that's 3% being used up. Oh, okay, I see. So yeah, this is how much is free. 926 megs, and 24% is being used up. So let's give this a moment, and it's going to finish installing all the dependencies, all the packages that are required for the PeerTube project to run. Yeah, sometimes you'll see some kind of an info message show there appears to be a trouble with your network connection, and sometimes it'll totally fail out, and the only choice we have is just basically run that command again. But in order to actually run that command again, we have to go back to the previous directory. As you see here, cd ... we'd have to do that and then run this command again, because it changes into this PeerTube latest directory, and then trying to change it into that same directory again doesn't work unless you remove that cd part. What I'm saying is basically, if you press up and press enter, it's not going to work. You're going to have to do cd ... in order for you to press up and enter to rerun that command. Alright, so I personally like to run that command again. So we need to cd ... first, and then press up twice. So next we're going to copy the production configuration file into the config directory. Alright, so now we're going to edit this configuration file. Now we're going to do it manually. I have some commands here so that it can automate this process, but I want to do it manually because there's some other settings I want to make sure to set while I'm in here, and so I'm using the commands as reference in here. Alright, so let's go ahead and set our domain name, host name, that we're using for this instance. And because we'll be using the import scripts, I'll have to make another video about how I import videos into my PeerTube sites. I'll have to make another tutorial about that. But I like to set this to a higher number. API rate limit. Let's set this to 300 in 10 seconds. No, I think that's a little bit too high. Let's set that to 250 in 10 seconds. Alright, login. See, the thing is that the import script, I think it needs to log in quite often as well and make a lot of API requests. So it uploads, it imports a lot of videos fast, and then it has to transcode them. That's where it takes a while, is the transcoding. So let's increment this to 25 in 5 minutes and see if that works out. We have to play around with these settings, and depending on how many channels, how many videos we're importing and stuff. So yeah, we'll have to play around with those settings. But for now, I think that's good. And so the database is on the same server as the PeerTube. So we'll leave it, the hostname as localhost, and the suffix is fine. They'll use the database named PeerTube_prod, username PeerTube, password PeerTube. We left those to be the defaults. And we're going to leave the SMTP settings alone for now, so there will be no email sending or email verification settings being enabled for the purpose of this tutorial. Alright, so there's the signature. Just set those in case. And so as you can see, the storage is going to hold a lot of different data, and all of this is going to be stored on the 4 terabyte hard drive that we have mounted. And we'll leave the log level as info, log rotation enabled, and the max file size, let's make that to be 24 megabytes. 20 max files, that works. And let's make the log file store anonymized IPs, just in case if somebody hacks in, they're not going to have a list of all of the users from the logs that access the website.
Search remote URI users, anonymous. Let's leave those settings as the defaults. Trending videos, we'll leave that as the defaults. Okay, now so the redundancy, I like to use this one, the first one that's on the list over here, which is min lifetime 48 hours, strategy most views. Alright, and we have to actually uncomment this line too right here. Sweet, so now that we have a strategy uncommented, enabled, I forget what CSP is right now. CSP directives are still being tested, so disabled. The report only mode at your own risk. Okay, so we'll leave that alone. Tracker enabled, private, true. Reject too many announces. We'll set that to true. Alright, and so history videos, there's not going to be any max age. I'll leave that as -1. Views videos, leave that also as -1. Plugins, we'll leave them enabled, and let's also leave the default to check for latest versions every 12 hours from the packages.joinpeertube.org URL. The cache settings, I think it's fine to have 500 previews and 500 video captions / subtitles in the cache. That sounds good. So we'll leave the defaults. And this email, we'll just change the domain on that, admin@deadtube. And I'll configure the SMTP settings and stuff later, but for the basics, right now we don't need all of that stuff. And so we'll make sure to disable the contact form, because since we don't have the SMTP settings enabled, the contact form will not work, and also requires email verification. We'll need to leave it as false, otherwise the server will not start if we don't have SMTP settings and we're using some kind of things that require mailing. But if you have SMTP settings configured and then you can change around those settings, it's not gonna mess with the server starting up, obviously. Alright, so let's enable some transcoding resolutions over here, and so it doesn't waste so much space, let's only do 1080p and 720p. Also, you know, when it comes to like people recording their screens and stuff, it's hard to read text when it's like such a lower quality. So 1080p and 720p is a good bet if you want to make sure that people can read the contents of the video and stuff too. So it's not so blurry. WebTorrent enabled, true. HLS enabled. Okay, so enabling HLS doubles the amount of space that it takes. But yeah, so let's go ahead and enable that. What it will do though is it'll speed up the playback. When people watch the videos, it'll make it smoother. Alright, and so we'll allow people to upload videos, and let's make it so that they can import videos from things like, from other video platforms like YouTube or Vimeo or BitChute. And we'll leave the proxy settings alone, and we'll also leave the torrents disabled. We don't want people to be able to import torrents. Usually torrents are some kind of pirated stuff anyway, which just causes trouble. Auto blacklist. So okay, so this, when people are allowed to upload videos, you can make it so that they won't be public until you approve them. And we'll leave this setting. Let's actually enable this. Yeah, we'll enable the auto blacklist. So just in case, you know, things won't show up on the site if we don't want them to. And we'll just change the name here. I'm not gonna change the whole description, just the name here, and that's it. Welcome to this PeerTube instance, and we'll just scroll down through these settings. These will be settings that show up on the About page. And so let's go ahead and uncomment all of these categories. I have tried on an earlier version of PeerTube to add my own custom categories, but it was a little bit buggy. It didn't show them. So it's something that I have to test to see how I can add more categories and have them to be usable and stuff by people. And also, how would that work if, you know, the categories are to sync up with other PeerTube sites? It's something I'll have to look into further. Alright, and so the default client route, we'll leave it as video, the trending page. And this instance, yeah, I'm not sure that this instance is not going to be hosting porn, but there might be some kind of stuff that's to do with, you know, that's controversial that people might not like hearing, but that's probably not considered as not safe for work, so we'll leave not safe for work as false. And anything that does show up here as not safe for work, like if somebody uploads like bloodiness or something, let's just make it so it blurs it out. Or like if somebody uploads something that would put somebody in shock by scrolling through seeing it, it'll blur it out by default. Alright, and so just change the Twitter username here to deadtube1, and followers instance enabled. Yeah, we're gonna allow people to follow the instance, and we're just gonna let it approve everybody. We're not gonna manually approve every instance that wants to follow us. And then following, I don't want to auto follow back, because say if like a porn instance follows you, then all that porn is gonna show up on your site, so we don't want that. Auto follow index, if you want to automatically follow instances, that's something that we do not want to do. And we'll leave the default theme. So let's go ahead and press Ctrl X to save this configuration. Now press Y and enter. Awesome, so that is out of the way. Let's go ahead and scroll down to the web server configuration. And we'll also just manually go through this and change any settings inside of that file. Alright, so first thing we need to do is change the domain name. Right? DeadTube is the domain name for this site. And let's change the access log and the error log path as well to update this domain name in there. Alrighty. So all of the instances where it shows peertubeexample.com, we need to change it to deadtube, because that is the domain name that we're using for this instance. And when we get to the SSL certificate configuration stuff, what we'll do is we'll comment this out. Okay, because these files don't exist just yet, and so it's gonna give us problems starting the server. if we have those uncommented right now. But what we will be doing is we will be adding or creating a self-signed certificate and adding that to the config here. But then once the site is publicly accessible, we can run the certbot command for it to generate a valid SSL certificate, which is signed by a authority, a recognized authority, and then there's not gonna be a warning when you go to the site. Alright, so let's scroll through here. Everything looks fine. All of that looks good. Alrighty. I think that should be all. We don't need to change anything else. Let's go ahead and just add these SSL settings. Okay. Now either use certbot to create an SSL cert. So to do that, you'll have to save the file. So let's save it, right? And let's open it back up again because we're going to, well, we haven't created the certificates yet. So let's go ahead and, okay, so we're not doing these steps, we're doing these ones. So we'll stop the Nginx server. We're doing the steps for the self-signed certificate, not for the certificate from certbot. Okay, so let's stop Nginx. Then let's issue this certificate. It's gonna just put it into these paths. Alright. US Oklahoma, Tulsa, and dead tube. Let's leave that empty. Fully qualified domain name, dead.tube. Email address, just leave that empty. Alright. So next we will edit the Nginx configuration file, and we will add the entries for these self-signed certificate in the web server configuration file. Alright, so let's save that, and we can test the Nginx config to make sure that everything's good. Alright, it says syntax is okay, test is successful. Great news. Now let's go ahead and just start the Nginx server. And let's go ahead and install UFW, a firewall software. And obviously it's going to be inactive right now, but I like to run the status command first. Alrighty, and so now let's go ahead and open up allow SSH connections, right? So we don't get locked out of this Raspberry Pi, out of our server. Now let's go ahead and enable Nginx HTTP and HTTPS. Alrighty. Now let's go ahead and enable the firewall. Effectively, this will make it so that, you know, nobody will be able to access, you know, the database port and any other services that are running. So that's the whole purpose for enabling a firewall and making it so that only certain ports are accessible. Firewall is active and enabled on system startup. Great. Okay, so now let's add some performance tuning settings for TCP/IP. Alright, and so let's enable those settings now. Sweet. And so now we just need to copy the PeerTube service file to the systemd system directory. This will make it so PeerTube service will start on boot when the Raspberry Pi comes up. And so now we need to run the daemon reload command so that it will update the service list. And let's enable PeerTube. And let's start the PeerTube service. Alright. And so now, if we look in the log file, which there's a command to do that. Let me see what command was that. Okay, so that's in the production guide. And there's a command here. Oh, scroll is funky. Okay, that's right here. Journal cuddle FEU PeerTube. Right? We run that command after the start. And that shows us the log of the service, of the PeerTube service. Alright, so it's showing here that creating the administrator, creating the client ID, client secret, generating RSA, username root, user password, this random generated string. Alright. Oh, I have to right click to copy, don't I? Okay, so now we can go to our website, DeadTube. Connection refused. Okay, wait a minute. We need to open the HTTPS port. That's what it is. I think it's just HTTPS. Okay, hold on just a second. Alright, so it's like this. UFW allow Gen X. Yeah. Oh, it's lowercase. Gen X HTTPS. Alright. So now. No? What? What is going on? Oh, I don't have LSOF installed. LSOF is a pretty cool tool. Shows us all the open files, including ports, when you pass in those parameters I just passed. Okay, so let's check out what is going on over here. Cannot use SMTP server because of lack of configuration. PeerTube will not be able to send mails. Clean cache. It should be working right now. Let's disable the firewall. UFW disable. Something with the firewall is probably causing problems, so let's disable it for a second. No, it looks like it's not the firewall, huh? Let's try to hit it as HTTP. Oh, okay, Nginx. Something did not happen. I think what we forgot to run a command here. Sites available. Did we copy that to sites enabled? I don't think we did. I think that's what we forgot. Sites available. Yeah, okay, so that's what we forgot. There's this one command over here. That I forgot to run. So let's run that now. Alright, and let's restart the Nginx. Yes, stop, and then start. Alright, there we go. So now we're getting it. Okay. I knew I missed something. There we go. So as you can see now, we're accessing the PeerTube site and we can enable the firewall back. Where is it here? UFW enable. Let me just refresh this page. Okay, yeah. So now we can log in, and so let's say that we don't have access to the root password for whatever reason. It's right here, but let's say that we don't know it. We lost it somewhere. We can't find it in the log file. There's too many errors and stuff happening, and then finally we get it all up and running. And so we just need to run this command to change the root password. Oops. Why is it doing the letter D? Okay. Let's copy that. Okay, and let's run that. So now it's going to ask me for a new password for the root user. One of these days. Okay, there we go. Sweet. So now we can log in. And administer the site and upload videos, create users, and all of that good stuff. Modify the theme. Sky's the limit. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoy this little tutorial I put together. It's taken me a few days to put this together, and so yeah, like, share, subscribe, and look out for more videos coming from me in the future.